They say water holds memory, that every drop that has ever existed still exists, carrying with it the echoes of the past. I never believed it. Not until I moved into the old lighthouse keeper's cottage on Blackwood Point. It was a steal, a ridiculously low price for a stone house perched on a cliff, overlooking the churning grey sea. The realtor, a nervous man named Mr. Abernathy, had mumbled something about it being on the market for a while, and some local superstitions. I just laughed it off. A ghost story or two wasn't going to scare me away from $1 million view. The first week was idyllic. I spent my days painting the stunning, moody landscapes, and my nights lulled to sleep by the rhythmic crash of waves against the rocks below. The air was clean, salty, and invigorating. But then small things started to happen. A dripping sound from the kitchen sink, even though I'd tightened the faucet until my knuckles were white. The scent of salt water in rooms far from any open window. A cold spot that seemed to drift through the hallway like a lost cloud. I dismissed it all as the quirks of an old house settling. The real strangeness began with the dreams. I'd dream of water. Not the peaceful sea I saw from my window, but dark, suffocating water. I'd be pulled under, my lungs screaming for air, my limbs screaming for air, my limbs thrashing against an unseen force. I'd see faces in the depths pale, waterlogged faces with eyes wide with a silent, eternal terror. I'd wake up gasping, my sheets soaked in sweat, the taste of salt on my lips. One evening, a storm rolled in, a monster of a tempest that shook the very foundations of the cottage. The power went out, plunging me into a world of flickering candlelight and roaring winds. That's when I heard it. A soft, mournful song, a woman's voice, carried on the wind. It wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the house with me. I followed the sound, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, to the small, circular room at the base of the lighthouse tower, a room I had been using for storage. The singing was loudest there. In the center of the room, shimmering in the candlelight, was a puddle of water. It hadn't been there before. It was perfectly still, reflecting the ceiling like a black mirror. As I stared, a face emerged from its surface. A woman with long, dark hair that floated around her like seaweed. Her skin was a ghostly white, and her eyes were empty sockets, dark voids that seemed to pull all the light and warmth from the room. Her mouth opened, but instead of the song, a gurgling, watery scream echoed in my mind. I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of old boxes. Inside one, a leather-bound journal fell out. It was the lighthouse keeper's log, dated over a century ago. My hands trembled as I opened it. The keeper, a man named Thomas, wrote of his wife, Elara. He wrote of her beauty, her voice, her love for the sea. But then the entries grew darker. He wrote of her strange moods, her late-night walks along the cliff edge, her claims that the sea was calling to her. The final entry was almost illegible, the ink smudged as if by tears or seawater. "Elara is gone," it read. "The storm took her. I saw her walk into the waves, smiling. She did not fight. She just let it take her." but she is not at peace. At night, I hear her weeping in the walls. I see her wet footprints on the floor. She brings the sea into our home, trying to pull me in with her. The water is her grave, and she wants it to be mine, too. A loud splash from the tower room snapped me back to the present. The puddle was larger now, spreading across the stone floor like a pool of black oil. From it, a hand emerged, then an arm, pale and slick. The figure of the woman Elara began to pull itself out of the water, which was no mere puddle but a portal to some lightless, drowned world. She was dragging herself towards me, her empty eyes fixed on mine. A trail of seawater and seaweed followed her, and the smell of the deep ocean, of rot and decay, filled the air. I scrambled backward, crab walking away as she rose to her full, spectral height. She was terrifying and tragic, her form shimmering and indistinct, like a reflection on a disturbed pond. Water dripped from her hair and fingertips, each drop hitting the floor with a sound that was unnervously loud in the storm-silenced cottage. She reached for me, her mouth open in that silent, horrifying scream. I could feel a crushing pressure building in my chest, as if I were 100 feet beneath the waves. Panic gave me strength. I bolted, running through the house, slamming doors behind me, but I could hear her coming. It wasn't the sound of footsteps, but a wet, dragging sound, the sound of a body being pulled across the floor. I made it to the front door, fumbling with the old iron latch. As I finally wrenched it open, a wave of cold, briny water surged through the doorway, knocking me off my feet. It wasn't from the storm. It was coming from inside the house. The entire cottage was flooding. Water poured from the walls, bubbled up from the floorboards. The furniture began to float, bumping into each other in a grotesque parody of life. I saw Elara's face in every reflection, her sorrow and her rage twisting the water into a monstrous entity. The house wasn't just haunted. It was possessed by her and her watery grave. She wasn't just a ghost in the house. The house was her ghost. I swam. I clawed my way through the rising, churning water, pushing past my floating paintings and overturned chairs. The front door was now a torrent, pushing me back in. Desperate, I saw the kitchen window. With the last of my strength, I grabbed a floating chair and hurled it at the glass. It shattered, and the sea outside met the sea inside. I was thrown out by the sheer force of the clashing waters, tossed into the raging storm. I washed up on the small, rocky beach at the base of the cliff, bruised, hypothermic, but alive. I lay there for what felt like hours, watching the lighthouse keeper's cottage. From the outside, it looked untouched by the storm. The lights were off, the windows dark. It was just an old stone house on a cliff, but I knew what was inside. An endless, weeping sea, an eternal storm, and a ghost who would forever try to pull the living into her drowned embrace. I never went back. I left everything I owned in that house. Mr. Abernathy, the realtor, wasn't surprised when I called him. He just sighed and said he'd handle it. I still have nightmares about suffocating in dark water. Sometimes, when it rains, I can almost hear a woman's mournful song on the wind, and I can taste the salt. They say water holds memory. Now I know it's true. And some memories are so full of sorrow, they'll do anything to keep from being forgotten. They'll drown you in their past just to have company in the dark.